Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed your weekend and are ready for some more chemistry labs this week. So this week we're doing a lab called Hydrates, and what we're doing is we're using some experimental methods to understand exactly how many moles of hydrate or water are in a specific solution. So if you look at what's called a desiccant, it reacts spontaneously with the air in order to provide either multiple hydrates or a single hydrate with the specific compound. And this is important because if you want to keep a compound away from water, then you can stick it in a sealed container with some desiccant and it will keep the water from reacting with whatever compound that you have at the time. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look first at the moles of hydration of copper sulfate, which we know exactly how many moles of water there are in that. And then what we're going to do is we are going to look at something we have no idea what the moles of hydration are, so that way you can use what you've already learned from your first experiment with the moles of hydration and how you're going to be able to calculate that based on a known, and then we're going to try it with an unknown. So the first thing you guys are going to want to do when you're coming into lab is you're going to want to set up your apparatus. Now, it may already be set up for you when you get here, but this is kind of the basic setup with your tube hooked to your Bunsen burner and a circular ring stand with your crucible and a crucible lid there. So what you're going to do is we're going to start this up. So you turn on your gas and you just know that it's flowing, and you're going to light your flame. Now, the flame can be a little bit difficult to see at first, but when you look at it, you can kind of see that there's a little blue inner cone and an outer cone if you look real close. Okay, so the more purplish part of the Bunsen burner or of the flame, you're going to want to dial down so that way only that part is touching the crucible. And then there's an inner kind of lighter blue cone that you don't want touching it. So you're going to heat this up first without any solid in it, and that's going to drive off any oils that your skin may have put onto the crucible, and it's also going to make sure that anything from the air, any water that may be in the crucible is gone now. So I've already done that, and so what I'm doing now is I'm heating up my solid, and we're trying to drive off the moles of hydration with it. So we're heating it very carefully, and we're keeping this lid ajar. You can see that it's not quite on the crucible. So we're doing that for the first about 2 minutes, and then after we're increasing the heat. So the way we're going to increase the heat is, you see that blue inner cone right there? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to make that come up so it touches the bottom of this crucible. Okay, now that blue tip of that cone is the hottest part of this Bunsen burner. So it's heating up everything around, so the clay triangle and the ring stand, so be very careful. We provided hot hands, and you also have these very nice clamps that you can use to grab things with. Okay, so after you've heated it and you've increased the heat on it, what you're going to do is you're going to put the top lid on it after the appropriate time. Okay, so what you're doing with that is you're making sure that the water that you've just driven off is not being put back into your compound. It's sealing it off. Okay, now this is after you've heated it for the 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, so then what you're going to do is you'll see that I kind of have a pad right there. So you'll turn off your Bunsen burner. That should be the first thing you do. Okay, you see there's no flame, and you're going to take your tongs and you're going to grab it, and you're going to stick it down specifically onto your your hot pad, so that way it doesn't come in direct contact, because the lab bench is so cold and the crucible is so warm that if you were to put the crucible onto the lab bench, it may either fracture the crucible or it may damage the lab bench, and you don't want to do that. So you're going to do that with the solid that you've been provided, and after you've done that, you're going to, after you've let it cool, which we talked about why cooling before you weigh something is important. Once you've let it come to room temperature, then you're going to use your tongs again. Even though it's going to room temperature, you're going to use your tongs to grab it, and you're going to go and weigh it. We're not touching it with our hands because, one, we don't want the oils on our skin to get onto the crucible, therefore changing the mass, which will change the mass of the overall compound, and that will throw off our numbers. And two, because you have to be very careful. There's no difference in look from a hot crucible to a cold crucible, so you have to be very careful either way. Okay, so don't never touch it with your hands. If you want to touch it with your hands, either put on a glove or you can take a paper towel, stick it to the side, and then touch it that way. Okay, so then you're doing this, you're going to need 2 crucibles. You can be heating one up while the other's cooling down, so that way you can get through the experiment a little bit quicker. And so once you've done this with your copper sulfate, you're going to repeat this procedure, except you're going to do it with calcium chloride. Now, once you've done it with your calcium chloride, you're going to have a bunch of calculations that you're going to need to do, because the only part we know about the calcium chloride is the anhydrous part, which is the CaCl2, right? So we need to be able to calculate the number or the moles of hydration within that compound, so we can see, okay, if it has less moles, then it's a better desiccant than if it has more moles. So we're trying to figure out, is calcium chloride a good desiccant? So it's a pretty simple lab. Just be safe and realize we're working with Bunsen burners and hot objects. So watch out for the flame of the Bunsen burner. Try to keep your things away from it. And girls, you'll want to put your hair back so that way you don't get your hair caught in the flame. Hope you guys enjoy this lab.